Hey you, and welcome. My name is Mike, and in this video we're going to talk about Philly in Boston. Philip was his name and pre-med was his game, among other things, in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Now, I've never used Craigslist. I've never needed to find a list of Craigs, but what you can find on there and what you can do on there seems bananas. Now, back in 2009, the internet, was first kind of becoming what we know it as today. A lot of the websites we use today were kind of in their infancy back then. It was a lot wackier, a lot more Wild West. And Philip used that to his advantage in Beantown. Let's have a go. Julissa Brisman was very excited. On the 13th of April 2009, she was boarding an Amtrak from New York City to Boston. She was a New Yorker true and true. Ended every conversation with, "Hey, I'm walking here!" But she was going to Boston for work. She was 25 years old, studying to become a substance abuse counselor. But as her side gig, she would give sensual massages. Let's just say you would leave one of those massages with a bit of a hop in your step, Alright, let's move on. She would advertise on the list of Craigs, sometimes using the name Morgan, Susie, Rachel, and when she arrived in Boston, she asked a friend of hers to post on Craigslist this ad. "Hi, my girlfriend Morgan, the massage therapist, will be visiting Boston Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday. She visits only once every 1 to 2 months, so don't miss her. Her pics are real, recent, and attached to this message. She's visiting just these couple of days and I highly recommend her. Yada yada yada. I do not give out a contact number until you have provided yours. Kisses, XOXO, Morgan and Mary." Hey, I'm walking in! Upon checking in at the Marriott Copley Hotel, Julissa had a quiet night on the 13th. Not many clients. On the 14th of April, the very next day, Julissa's friend who posted the message got an email from a client. She gave this client Julissa's number and he called then Julissa asking if she'd be available around 10 p.m, which was fine with her as she worked until 11. He sounded, friendly, cordial on the phone, but Julissa's friend, Sarah was her name, asked Julissa, text her before this client arrives and after he leaves. Just to be safe. Her phone did not vibrate that night. A woman named Jill Stern was just staying, down the hall and across the way from Julissa's room that night. And she, heard things. Just after 10 p.m., she heard what sounded like some kind of commotion, and a shriek, and then another. She popped the head out of her room and into the hotel hallway, and saw a woman lying on the carpet, half in and half out, down the hall. She called security, and a lad came up, checked on her, and saw blood. Julissa had been shot 3 times, and had blunt force trauma to the head. She passed away at 10:36 p.m. in the emergency room at Boston Medical Center. Inside, the closet had 2 bullet holes in it. Julissa had a zip tie dangling from her wrist. She had probably fought her attacker while he was trying to tie her up and rob her, and hence he shot her, most likely in the doorway, in a panic, and fled before anyone could show up. When the investigators began examining the surveillance footage from the Marriott Copley, they saw what they believed to be the guy. They didn't have his ID, but he looked remarkably similar to a guy who had committed a remarkably similar crime just 3 days prior. 29-year-old Trissa Leffler arrived in Boston on a flight from Las Vegas on the 9th of April. She was a sex worker, not in town to see the Red Sox. As soon as she checked into her hotel, the Westin Copley Place, a 2-minute walk from the Marriott Copley, she placed an ad on Craigslist under the name Valerie. in the late hours of the 9th of April, she got a call, with the guy on the line agreeing to pay 200 buckos for, an hour of her company. When he arrived at the hotel after 12 a.m. on the 10th of April, a Friday, they met at the elevator and she took him to her room. Once inside, he pulled out a shooter and pulled on gloves. He zip-tied her hands, took $800 from her, took her credit cards, took 2 pairs of her underwear, and erased his number from her phone. He then put duct tape over her mouth. He took off his gloves to do that. Then he told her he would wait 15 minutes till he got out of the building, then he would call security and get them to come get her. Trisha called the cops that very night. The next morning, the cops showed Trisha some grainy pictures they had taken from the hotel's CCTV, asking her to identify. And she did. But that was it for 3 days until Julissa Brisman was found in the Marriott Copley. After Julissa's murder, they knew it was the same guy that had robbed Trisha. She identified him again and was pretty scared to know that this could have happened to her. And it happened in a hotel that was a stone's throw away a couple of days previous. It was a tall, blonde fella, didn't seem too perturbed about what he had done in either incident, and didn't attempt any disguise. In fact, they could tell by looking at him that he made rookie mistakes. For one, he used his phone at the location of the crime, both times. So, who was he? Well, he would be someone that would be dubbed the Craigslist killer. And that's what Sarah, Julissa's friend who posted the ad, thought she could help with. She forwarded the email this guy had sent regarding Julissa's advert to the police. Once the investigators had the email, they began to trace the IP address of where it came from. Back in 2009, I guess, folk weren't as savvy as they are today about concealing the IP address, because he made no attempt to do so. Another thing was that, remember he had, taken Trisha's phone and erased his number that he called her with from? Yeah, so he erased her number from the phone, but the service provider will still have it, so. Duh. And while they were tracking this fella down, he was still on the move. In fact, he was having a grand old time, gambling away at the Foxwoods Resort Casino in Connecticut. What a lad. On April 16th, exotic dancer Cynthia Melton was settling into her room at the Holiday Inn Express in Warwick, Rhode Island. She, like Trisha and Julissa, placed an ad on Craigslist, seeing if, anyone wanted a lap dance. This Holiday Inn was between Foxwoods Casino and Boston, and this guy did want a lap dance. Or so he said. At 10:51 p.m., just like he did with Trisha, as soon as he was in the room with Cynthia, pulled a gun, give me all your money. He zip-tied her hands, had her on the ground, and as he was about to ask, where's those, dollar dues? Her phone rang. It was Cynthia's husband, who was downstairs in the lobby. She was supposed to text him before and after, so he knew everything was cool. Cynthia's husband burst into the room. Oh, jeez, lads. But upon getting in there and seeing a guy with a gun standing over his zip-tied wife, he said, fuck this, legged it out of the room. The Craigslist killer also fled at that point, running out the door in the opposite direction.
Search for the so-called Craigslist killer. There is new evidence linking the assaults to plastic handcuffs. CBS News science and technology correspondent Daniel Seberg is in Boston this morning with more. Daniel, good morning to you.
That's right. Good morning, Jeff. Those handcuffs are believed to be the link between 3 different attacks. And after receiving more than 150 tips over the weekend, this morning police appear to be closing in on the man known as the Craigslist killer.
Thursday night, the latest disturbing incident. A woman found tied up in a Warwick, Rhode Island hotel room after advertising for sexual acts on the popular internet marketplace Craigslist. Her husband broke up the attack.
Who knows where the crime would have led, whether it would have led to something more serious than just the demand for money and items.
Earlier last week, Julissa Brisman was shot to death in a Boston hotel after a similar encounter. an apparent robbery gone wrong.
Both of these individuals were advertising on Craigslist, and they were advertising masseuse services.
Hotel surveillance video shows this man, and along with another armed robbery that occurred in Boston 2 weeks ago, police suspect all three cases are related. Sally, an escort who asked us to conceal her identity, says women in her industry increasingly run background checks and avoid Craigslist.
It would be 2 days later that the police would get a name and an address from tracing the killer's email. The address was in High Point Circle, Quincy. The name was Philip Markoff. They began scoping out his home, hoping he'd look like the guy in the surveillance tapes. And they saw Philip Markoff leaving the building with an attractive woman at his side, his girlfriend, Megan McAllister. They followed them, and the pair seemed to be in a great old mood. Philip not a care in the world, very lovey-dovey. And they were sure it was him. Philip was 23 years old, Megan 2 years older than himself. He was born in 1986 in the small town of Sherrill, New York. He graduated high school in 2004. In 2005, he met Megan while volunteering at a hospital, and he attended SUNY Albany as a pre-med student. After, he applied to the Boston University School of Medicine, and in 2009 was in his second year. In April 2009, Megan was his fiancée, with the wedding bells due to ring out on the 14th of August 2009. And now, instead, he was about to be arrested. If they could catch him. Because as they were surveilling him, the police saw Philip and Megan leave their apartment with a suitcase and backpacks, heading off, driving south. The police quickly contacted Tricia once again. They needed a positive ID before they could arrest him. They got a copy of Philip's photo ID from university and showed it to Tricia, who was all the way in New York. They worked with an NYPD sergeant who got it to her just as Philip was approaching state lines. And becoming Doctor, was arrested near Walpole at 4 p.m. on the 20th of April. 420.
All right, for the record, today's date is April 20th, the year 2009. The young man being interviewed here this afternoon is Mr. Philip. Would you pronounce and spell your last name, please?
Markoff, M-A-R-K-O-F-F.
Would you like to speak to us now relative to some questions we have to ask you?
Well, it depends what they're about. Maybe I should speak to a lawyer.
Well, it's up to yourself, and it's a decision you have to make.
Well, what's this about?
Well, it's about a series of incidents that have gone on, and we just have some questions. As you're well aware of, there's been some reports of some robberies and a homicide, and we've been following a ton of leads as a result of that stuff. And you're a person of interest at this point, and we'd like to speak to you relative to that.
Okay, maybe. Can you get me a lawyer then?
Can I get you a lawyer?
Yeah.
You have a right to get you a lawyer yourself. And,
well, I don't know. I don't know where to get a lawyer from.
Yeah, is that your decision that you'd rather have a lawyer than to speak with me?
I mean, yeah, I don't really know what this is about, but I probably should. I don't want to say something.
Just so that it's clear, you're asking us to try to provide you an attorney. You don't have.
Yeah, I don't have a lawyer. I don't know where to get a lawyer.
And you absolutely don't want to talk to us unless you have an attorney before you talk to us. Because the thing of it is I want to be very frank with you. I'm sure you have some idea of what we're looking at here, right? You have some idea what we're talking about?
Not really.
Well, you live in the area and you've been watching the news?
I don't really watch the news.
Do you read the newspapers?
No.
Not at all?
No, people my age don't really watch.
Okay, so you don't watch the news, all right. Well, the detective talked about it briefly, that there's a number of incidents that have happened in the area. Your physical description, and that you're a white male with light-colored hair, has triggered our interest in you to some certain extent. But as you can imagine, there's about probably 80,000 other people that are about your height, about your facial features, about your hair color.
Yeah.
You're a person of interest because of these things and some other things. We would like to talk to you about that, but we're not going to talk to you if you insist on having an attorney.
What are the other things?
Well, until we get through this format, we can't talk to you about anything.
Okay, well.
As I alluded to early on about that, there's been a lot of stuff going on, and as a result of that stuff, there's been hundreds of tips coming in here. And if you haven't read the paper, you really don't have a clue as to what we're talking about?
No, I really don't read the paper or watch the news.
So in the last week or two, you haven't heard anything about some stuff that's been going on in and around Boston regarding Craigslist?
No, I really don't watch the news.
There's a photograph in one of the surveillance photographs, or a couple of the surveillance photographs, there's a strong likeness and image to yourself, Philip.
Okay.
One of the reasons why you're here. Well, tell me this, do you have anything to do with Craigslist at all? Do you kind of like advertise or buy clothes or buy cars or do anything like that on Craigslist? Have you been in Rhode Island at all lately?
Well, I go through Rhode Island.
Okay, do you stop? Have you stopped going through Rhode Island at a hotel at all?
Maybe to get gas.
Okay, at a hotel?
At a hotel?
Yeah.
You wouldn't get gas at a hotel.
Well, that's what I asked. Have you stopped?
I don't think so.
On the way through? You don't think so? You don't think you're at a hotel in Rhode Island?
I don't think so.
Okay, you seem to be getting a little frustrated.
Yeah, because you keep asking me the same question. I'm
going to ask you, Philip, the first incident that I spoke to in the Westin Hotel, a girl was robbed. Did you have anything to do with that?
No.
Philip?
Well, I just answered you.
It was a crazy story. Someone, who seemed to be on a successful career path, leading a double life. Though to be fair, we've talked about our fair share of doctor killers in these old videos.
The man on your left is under arrest in the case. Police say he's the same man pictured on your right in those hotel surveillance photos. That suspect in custody is a 22-year-old medical student at Boston University.
Philip Markoff is now facing murder and kidnapping charges. And 7's Nicole Oliverio is live in the South End where Markoff's being held. Nicole.
That's right. Right now, Philip Markoff is inside the Boston Police Department, and he has an unsuspecting resume, a 22-year-old med student scheduled to be married this summer, but police say he is the Craigslist killer.
But why? That was the hot ticket. Why would he do what he did?
The big question at this point is, why did he do it? One possible motive emerging this morning is gambling debts.
It wasn't sexual or anything. Though the women worked in that industry or closely related to it, he never did anything sexual with the women. And Julissa, the one he killed, he did so because she resisted. The murder wasn't the goal. The robbery was, and he never got much out of them either. 800 bucks being the most, as the other two were interrupted. Everyone who knew Philip said he was a friendly guy. They were shocked. He was never in trouble.
He's pleaded not guilty. He is not guilty.
He had everything going for him. The only possible motive people have kind of debated, with something they're still debating, was maybe a gambling debt, but that's never really been substantiated. He was a bit of a fan of the all on red. I don't know.
What do you believe was the motive in this case?
Our belief right now is that Philip Markoff was motivated by robbery. We are exploring and not foreclosing any other possible motives, but at this time our theory of the case is that he was preying upon young women who were advertising their services on Craigslist for robbery.
But why? I mean, there are reports that he had a gambling debt. Is that something you guys are looking into and a valid motive?
Well, I think that's something that at this point we're looking at, but at this point, again, we continue to believe that his focus was robbery. What motivated his robbery, why he was robbing women, could gambling have been an issue? We'll look at that, but right now, robbery was the motive.
There was never any indication that Megan knew anything about the crimes Philip had committed. And this in fact is an email she wrote to reporters. To the Boston Herald, Philip is a beautiful man, inside and out. He is intelligent, loyal, and the best friend a woman could ask for. He would not hurt a fly. Unfortunately, the Boston police try to make money out of these things and release things without my knowledge or consent. I will stand by Philip as I know he is innocent. I love him now and always will. Things that age poorly, you know where this is going. However, just a few hours later after she sent that, the police found in Philip's apartment Trisha's cards, her underwear. They found the gun he had used inside a hollowed out copy of Grey's Anatomy. Ooh, quite symbolic. If that was in a movie, you would roll your eyes. And they also found, the same zip ties that he used. Philip was charged with murder, robbery, and kidnapping, and he pled not guilty. In the initial days after the arrest and publication of who the Craigslist killer really was, some strange things were found online. One was an ad linked to Philip's phone titled Ebony Erotic Massage, which asked people to call Philip's number and book in. Probably, maybe he was trying to lure men in to rob them or something. A username was also linked to Philip, SexAddict53885, and that name popped up on various websites. Passion.com, Alt.com, Extreme Restraints, and Gay Club List. Some tried to link that to his crimes, that, he was leading a double life and was doing it for, the thrill of it, which is ramping up and up. Certainly in that whole side of him, the sexual things. That was certainly another thing he kept, hidden from Megan, his fiancée, and speaking of his fiancée, soon after the wedding was called off. Unfortunately. In June, Megan visited Philip once again, and well, her support wasn't so steadfast anymore. She broke up with him.
McAllister's lawyer doesn't expect her to visit again in the near future.
I think she feels good about coming up and seeing him, but now it's time to move on with other things in her life.
To date, McAllister has professed her support and his innocence, but now it appears she may have heard enough. New reports say police found 16 pairs of women's underpants, allegedly souvenirs from his victims, and 60 pairs of plastic restraints hidden under the bed he shared with McAllister.
Philip actually made several suicide attempts in prison. 3 days after he was first arrested, shoelace marks were found around his neck. Then he tried again the day after Megan broke up with him, and once again on the day his wedding was due to be held. On August 15th, 2010, which would be 1 year and 1 day after his wedding was supposed to be held and 7 months before the trial would begin, he was successful.
The same weekend, Philip Markoff was found dead in his cell. He should have been celebrating his 1-year wedding anniversary. But last year, his fiancée called off the engagement after discovering he was the alleged Craigslist killer.
He slashed major arteries in his ankles, legs, and neck, stuffed toilet paper down his throat, and covered his head with a plastic bag. As he bled out in his cell, Philip wrote on the wall in his own blood, Megan and Pocket. Pocket being their pet name for each other. He had photos of both of them scattered around his cell. And so ends the story of Craigslist's mad lad Philip Markoff. And people are still debating to this very day why he did it. Why he did all of it. Was he a thrill seeker who just went too far? Did he have another reason for robbing people? Because it didn't seem like he kind of got much enjoyment out of it, like he was, a wannabe serial killer or anything. It seemed like he genuinely had a goal, which was to get money. And he was, doing it to people maybe in the sex industry because he thought they wouldn't report it to the police. But then again, maybe he was, he was getting off on it. And then why did he want to end his own life? To spare Megan the trial, or maybe, he had everything going for him and he threw it all away for, nothing, and murdered an innocent woman.
He would not be the kind of person who wanted to face the music, face the trial, be embarrassed and humiliated in public during his trial for first-degree murder.
So he could have been all of those things, or just a giant piece of shit. You be the judge. Thank you so much for watching. I really appreciate it. I will see you as always real soon in the next one. Take care of yourselves. Mike out.